What really happens when you say Bloody Mary 3 times? You're 13 years old. It's past midnight at a sleepover, and your friends are daring you to do it. The bathroom is dark except for a single flickering candle. Your heart is pounding so hard you can hear it in your ears. You stare at your own reflection in the mirror, and someone whispers, "Say it 3 times." Your mouth goes dry. You know it's stupid. You know it's just a game. But there's this primal part of your brain screaming at you not to say those words. Because what if something actually answers? Look, we've all been there. Maybe not in that exact scenario, but we've all felt that ice-cold dread when someone mentions Bloody Mary. And here's the thing. There's a reason this legend has survived for generations. There's a reason it still terrifies people today. And what I'm about to tell you might make you never look at a mirror the same way again. My name is Nick, and I spend way too much time thinking about what really happens when you say Bloody Mary 3 times. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button and drop a like if this video helps you understand why this legend refuses to die. Now, before we dive into the deep end, I want you to understand something. This isn't just about some silly slumber party game. This is about something far more disturbing. Something rooted in real history, real deaths, and real psychological horror that has marked people for life. Let's start with what actually happens in these bathrooms across America, across the world really, when teenagers and even adults decide to test this legend. You stand in front of a mirror. Lights off. Usually there's a candle because somehow that makes it more official, right? And you're supposed to say Bloody Mary 3 times. Some versions say you have to spin around. Some say you have to stare directly into your own eyes without blinking. Some say you do it at exactly 3 a.m. But here's what the majority of people don't realize. The specific rules don't matter. What matters is what your mind does to you in that darkness. I'm going to tell you about Sarah Mitchell. Real person. Real name. This happened in 1997 in a small town outside of Portland, Oregon. Sarah was 14 years old, and she was what you'd call the brave one in her friend group. The one who always took the dares. The one who laughed at scary movies. On October 31st, Halloween night, she was at a party at her friend Jennifer's house. There were about 8 girls there, and around midnight, after they'd exhausted all the usual party games, someone brought up Bloody Mary. Now, Sarah had done this before. Multiple times, actually. She thought it was nonsense. But something about that night felt different. Jennifer's house was old, built in 1923, and the bathroom they chose had this antique mirror with an ornate brass frame. The kind of mirror that looks like it's seen things, you know what I mean? The girls set up a single candle on the sink counter. Sarah volunteered to go first, obviously. The other girls crowded outside the bathroom door, giggling nervously. And here's where it gets interesting. Sarah stood in front of that mirror. She could hear her friends whispering outside. She lit the candle, and the flame created these dancing shadows across her face that made her look almost unrecognizable. She took a deep breath. Bloody Mary. Her voice sounded strange in the small bathroom. Hollow. Like it was coming from somewhere else. Bloody Mary. The candle flickered. Nothing unusual about that. Candles flicker. But Sarah's heart started racing anyway. She stared into her own eyes in that mirror, and for just a second she could swear her reflection blinked a fraction of a second after she did. She never said it the 3rd time. Because that's when she saw something move behind her reflection. Something that wasn't there when she looked over her shoulder. Something that was only visible in the mirror. Sarah screamed. She screamed so loud that Jennifer's parents came running upstairs. She burst out of that bathroom hyperventilating, crying, completely losing it. Her friends thought she was pranking them at first. But the look on Sarah's face, they said it was pure, genuine terror. The kind of terror you can't fake. She refused to tell anyone what she saw. Not her friends, not her parents, not even the therapist her mom took her to see 3 weeks later. To this day, Sarah won't talk about it. I know because I reached out to her for this video. She responded with a 2-word email, "Leave me alone." Now you might be thinking, come on Nick, she probably just scared herself. It was Halloween, it was dark, her mind was playing tricks on her. And look, I get it. That's the rational explanation. But here's what makes this interesting. Sarah wasn't the only one. Over the next 6 months, 3 other girls at that same school tried the Bloody Mary ritual. 3 separate incidents. None of them knew about Sarah's experience because Sarah refused to talk about it. The second girl, Amanda Chin, did it at home alone in February 1998. Her parents found her passed out in the bathroom, the mirror shattered. Amanda claimed she didn't remember breaking it. To this point, she had no cuts on her hands, no injuries that would explain how the mirror got destroyed. It was like something hit it from the inside. The third girl, Rebecca Torres, lasted until all 3 repetitions. But here's what happened. After she said Bloody Mary, the 3rd time, the candle went out. And in the darkness, she said she heard breathing. Not her own breathing. Someone else's. Coming from the mirror. She felt breath on her face even though she was completely alone in that bathroom. Rebecca turned on the lights so fast she actually pulled the switch off the wall. When the lights came on, she saw something that made her blood run cold. On the mirror, in the condensation that had somehow formed despite the room being dry and cool, there were handprints. Small handprints. Like a child's hands. But they were on the inside of the glass, like someone had pressed against the mirror from within. The fourth girl? I'm not going to say her name because her family specifically asked that it remain private. What happened to her was worse. Much worse. She did the ritual and nothing happened. Or so she thought. But over the next 2 weeks, she started seeing a woman in every reflective surface. Car windows. Store windows. Her phone screen when it was turned off. And this woman was getting closer in each reflection. Closer and closer, like she was walking towards something. On the 14th day, the girl stopped seeing the woman in reflections. And that's when the night terror started. Every single night, she would wake up screaming, saying that the woman was in her room. Standing at the foot of her bed. Watching her. Her parents tried everything. New bedroom. Sleep medication. Eventually, they moved to a different state. It's been 26 years. She still sees that woman sometimes. Now here's where we need to talk about who or what Bloody Mary actually is. Because the legend has been around for centuries, but it's evolved, mutated, changed depending on who's telling it. The most common theory links the legend to Queen Mary I of England, also known as Bloody Mary. She ruled from 1553 to 1558, and she earned that nickname honestly. During her 5-year reign, she had approximately 280 religious dissenters burned at the stake for heresy. She was trying to restore Catholicism to England after her father, Henry VIII, had broken from the Catholic Church. But here's what most people don't know about Mary I. She desperately wanted a child. She had several phantom pregnancies, convinced she was carrying an heir, only to realize months later that there was no baby. This psychological torture, combined with her increasingly violent attempts to suppress Protestantism, created a woman consumed by grief, rage, and religious zealotry. When she died in 1558, she died alone, possibly of uterine cancer. Some historians believe she died of ovarian cancer. Either way, it was a painful, drawn-out death. And according to some accounts, she spent her final days raving, claiming that she could see children in the mirrors around her room. Children that no one else could see. Children that she insisted were calling to her. Now, is this the same Bloody Mary from the legend? Maybe. Maybe not. Because there are other theories. Some folklore experts trace the ritual back to European divination practices from the 16th and 17th centuries. Young women would perform mirror rituals to see the face of their future husband. But there was always a dark side to these practices. If you performed the ritual wrong, or if you were destined to die before marriage, you wouldn't see your husband's face. You'd see a skull. Or worse, you'd see nothing at all, which meant you had no future. Over time, these divination rituals merged with stories of vengeful spirits and witches, creating the version of Bloody Mary we know today. But here's what really matters. Regardless of where the legend came from, something happens in those bathrooms. something consistent, something that can't be explained away as easily as you might think. Let me explain what happens to your brain when you stare into a mirror in low light conditions. There's a psychological phenomenon called the strange face illusion, discovered by researcher Giovanni Caputo at the University of Urbino in Italy. When you stare at your own face in dim lighting for an extended period, usually more than 10 minutes, your brain starts to do something weird. It stops recognizing the face as your own. The neural circuits responsible for face recognition begin to misfire. You start seeing distortions. Your face might appear to morph, to age, to transform into someone else entirely. Some people report seeing their face turn into an animal. Others see it decay like they're watching themselves decompose in real time. Now you might be thinking, okay Nick, so it's just psychology. It's just our brains freaking out. Mystery solved. But hold on. Because here's what Caputo and his team discovered that really threw them for a loop. 50% of participants reported seeing not just their own face changing, but seeing completely different faces appear behind them in the mirror. Faces that weren't there when they turned around. Faces that only existed in the reflection. And these weren't just random faces. People consistently reported seeing faces that appeared distressed, angry, or in pain. Some described seeing faces with expressions of pure malice. And this happened in controlled laboratory conditions with multiple participants over several studies. So the question becomes, if our brains are capable of generating these hallucinations, these visions of other faces in mirrors, what happens when you add in the cultural weight of the Bloody Mary legend? What happens when you prime your brain to expect something terrifying? What happens when you specifically invoke something by name? The answer is, it gets worse. I need to tell you about Matthew Henderson. This happened in 2003, and it's one of the most documented cases of a Bloody Mary ritual gone wrong. Matthew was 16 years old, living in a suburb of Chicago. He was into paranormal stuff, spent a lot of time on early internet forums talking about ghosts and urban legends. Unlike most kids who did the Bloody Mary ritual as a dare or a joke, Matthew actually believed in it. He wanted to make contact. He wanted to prove that something was real. On March 15, 2003, Matthew set up a video camera in his bathroom. This was before smartphones, remember, so he was using his family's camcorder, the kind with the little cassette tapes. He wanted to record whatever happened when he performed the ritual properly. He did his research. He found variations of the ritual from different sources and combined them into what he thought would be the most powerful version. He used 3 candles instead of 1. He did it at 3:03 a.m. He not only said Bloody Mary 3 times, but he also added an invitation: Bloody Mary, I summon you. Bloody Mary, I call you. Bloody Mary, appear to me. The camera was set up on the bathroom counter, pointing at Matthew and the mirror behind him. For the first 3 minutes of the video, nothing happens. Matthew is standing there, candles lit, staring at his reflection. You can see him trembling slightly. His breathing is fast and shallow. Then, at the 3:47 mark, one of the candles goes out. Matthew flinches but keeps staring at the mirror. At 4:12, the second candle goes out. Now there's only one light source, and the shadows in that bathroom look almost alive, writhing across the walls. Matthew says it again: Bloody Mary, appear to me. And here's what happens next. I've watched this video. I've watched it frame by frame. At 4:29, there's a change in Matthew's expression. He goes from nervous to absolutely frozen. His eyes go wide. His mouth opens slightly. And he starts backing away from the mirror slowly, never breaking eye contact with whatever he's seeing in that reflection. Then he runs. He doesn't scream. He doesn't make a sound. He just runs out of the bathroom so fast he knocks over the camera. The video goes black, but the audio keeps recording. And for the next 37 seconds, you can hear Matthew breathing heavily, crying, and then you hear him say, "She's still here. Oh God, she's still here. She came through." The camera was later found on the bathroom floor, still recording. The remaining candle had gone out. And on the mirror, Written in what looked like condensation but couldn't be explained by any natural cause, was a single word: mine. Matthew's parents found him the next morning curled up in the corner of his bedroom, unresponsive. He had to be hospitalized. When he finally started talking 3 days later, he told the doctors that he'd let something out. Something that had been trapped behind the mirror. And now it was following him. Matthew spent 6 months in psychiatric care. The official diagnosis was acute psychotic episode triggered by extreme stress and sleep deprivation. But here's what bothers me about that explanation: the video. The video shows something that the doctors couldn't explain away. Because if you look very carefully at the mirror in the background right before Matthew runs, there's a shadow. A silhouette of a person that isn't Matthew. It's there for exactly 3 frames and then it's gone. I've had video analysts look at this footage. None of them can explain it as a trick of the light or a reflection of something else in the room. The shadow appears to be a figure in a long dress or gown, and where its face should be, there's nothing. Just darkness. Here's where we need to get real about what's happening here. Because whether you believe in the supernatural or not, there's something deeply disturbing about the consistency of these experiences. Across different cultures, different time periods, different variations of the ritual, people report seeing the same things. A woman in dark clothing. A face covered in blood. Hands reaching out from the mirror. And most commonly, a feeling of overwhelming dread that persists long after the ritual is over. Some paranormal researchers believe that mirrors act as portals or thresholds between our world and something else. This isn't a new idea. Mirrors have been considered spiritually significant in almost every major culture throughout history. In Jewish tradition, mirrors are covered during the mourning period after someone dies because it's believed that mirrors can trap souls. In Victorian times, it was common practice to cover all mirrors in a house where someone had died for the same reason. In Chinese feng shui, mirrors are never placed directly facing a bed because it's believed that your soul leaves your body during sleep, and if it sees itself in the mirror, it might become confused and not return. Many cultures have similar beliefs about mirrors and sleep. But here's what really gets me. What if the legend of Bloody Mary is a warning that got turned into a game? What if, generations ago, people knew something about mirrors that we've forgotten? What if they knew that certain rituals, certain invocations, could create an opening for something to come through? And what if that something has been waiting patiently for centuries, every time someone says those words, for a chance to cross over? Let me tell you what happened in a small town in Massachusetts in 2011. It started with one girl at a middle school. She did the Bloody Mary ritual at a friend's house. Nothing happened, or so she thought. But then she started having nightmares. Vivid, horrible nightmares about drowning in blood, about mirrors shattering and cutting her to pieces. She told her friends at school about it. And here's where it gets interesting. 6 of her friends decided to do the ritual themselves to see if they'd have the same experience. Within 2 weeks, all 6 girls were having similar nightmares. Not identical, but similar themes. Mirrors, blood, a woman's voice calling their names. And then it spread. Other students started doing it. It became a thing, a trend, a challenge. The school had to bring in counselors because within a month, over 30 students were reporting severe anxiety, sleep disturbances, and in some cases, claims of seeing a woman following them. Some kids said they could feel someone watching them when they were alone. Others said they heard whispers coming from bathroom mirrors at school. The school administration tried to stop it. They sent letters to parents. They held assemblies about the dangers of engaging with occult practices. They even removed all the mirrors from the bathrooms temporarily, which just made it worse because then the kids said the woman didn't need mirrors anymore. She could appear anywhere. It took months for things to calm down. And even then, there were students who transferred to different schools because they couldn't shake the feeling that something was following them. That something had attached itself to them that night in front of the mirror. Now, was this mass hysteria? Mass psychogenic illness? That's the official explanation. When one person has an experience and shares it, Others can unconsciously replicate that experience through suggestion and anxiety. It's a documented phenomenon. But here's what bothers me about that explanation. It doesn't account for the physical evidence. It doesn't explain the handprints on Rebecca Torres's mirror. It doesn't explain the word mine appearing on Matthew Henderson's mirror. It doesn't explain why Sarah Mitchell still refuses to talk about what she saw, even 26 years later. There are people who study this stuff professionally. Paranormal investigators, demonologists, people who take this seriously and have developed what they call rules for mirror rituals. Rule number 1, never do it alone. The theory is that when you're alone, you're more vulnerable to whatever might respond. Having someone else present creates a sort of spiritual barrier, a witness that makes it harder for something to fully manifest or attach itself to you. Rule number 2, never do it in a place where someone has died, especially not a violent death. The belief is that mirrors in those locations have already absorbed negative energy, trauma, spiritual residue. Doing a summoning ritual in such a place is like opening a door that's already been weakened. Rule number 3, if you see something, don't make eye contact with it in the mirror. This is crucial. Eye contact is considered a form of permission, an acknowledgement that creates a connection. Once you make eye contact, whatever is in that mirror has a link to you. Rule number 4, if something happens, break the mirror immediately. The belief is that mirrors can trap entities, but they can also serve as doorways. Breaking the mirror severs the connection, but it has to be done in a specific way. You're supposed to throw salt on it first, then break it, then bury the pieces separately in different locations. Rule number 5, and this is the most important one, never invite it. Never use words like, I summon you, or appear to me, or come to me. The difference between saying Bloody Mary 3 times and actually inviting whatever is behind that name is the difference between knocking on a door and opening it wide. Matthew Henderson broke rule number 5. He invited it. And according to the people who study this, once you issue that invitation, once you give explicit permission, there's no taking it back. I want to be fair here and present the scientific perspective on all of this, because it's important to understand both sides. Neuroscientists and psychologists have studied the Bloody Mary phenomenon extensively. Dr. Caputo's research, which I mentioned earlier, provides a solid explanation for the visual distortions people experience. Our brains are pattern recognition machines. In low light, with limited sensory input, our brains start filling in the gaps with information that isn't really there. It's the same reason we see faces in clouds or hear voices in white noise. The fear response amplifies this effect. When you're scared, your brain goes into hypervigilance mode. You become more sensitive to any perceived threat. Your fight or flight system is activated. Adrenaline floods your system. Your pupils dilate, which actually makes you see even less clearly in low light. Your hearing becomes more acute, so you start picking up sounds you'd normally filter out. Combine all of this with the power of suggestion, the cultural weight of the legend, and the altered state of consciousness that comes from staring at your own reflection for an extended period, and you have a perfect storm for a terrifying experience that feels absolutely real even though it's internally generated. This is the rational explanation, the scientific explanation, and it makes sense. It accounts for most of what people experience. But here's where the scientific explanation starts to break down. It doesn't account for the shared experiences. It doesn't explain why people who have never heard each other's stories report seeing the same things. It doesn't explain the physical evidence, the handprints, the writing on mirrors, the broken glass with no explanation. Science says these are coincidences, exaggerations, false memories created after the fact. And maybe that's true. Maybe every single case has a rational explanation that we just haven't found yet. But there's another possibility, one that science doesn't like to consider. What if both explanations are true? What if our psychological vulnerability during these rituals creates an opening for something else? What if the fear, the sensory deprivation, the altered state of consciousness, doesn't just create hallucinations but actually thins the barrier between our reality and something else? There's a concept in various spiritual and occult traditions called liminal spaces. These are thresholds, boundaries, places between one state and another. Doorways, crossroads, mirrors. The theory is that liminal spaces exist in a state of possibility. They're neither fully one thing nor another. And in that ambiguous state, they become vulnerable to other influences, other presences, things that exist in the spaces between. When you perform the Bloody Mary ritual, you're creating a perfect storm of liminal conditions. You're standing in a bathroom which is itself a liminal space, a room of transition and transformation. You're doing it at night, preferably at 3 a.m., which is considered the most spiritually active time. You're using a mirror, which is a portal between reflection and reality. You're using candlelight, which creates shadows that exist between light and darkness. And you're entering an altered mental state by staring at your reflection until your brain starts to dissociate. Every single element of this ritual is designed, either deliberately or accidentally, to create the perfect conditions for something to cross over. And when you say the name 3 times, when you call out to Bloody Mary 3 times, you're not just invoking a legend. You're sending out a signal, a beacon. You're announcing your presence to whatever might be listening in those spaces between. The question isn't whether something answers. The question is what answers. I want to tell you about 3 people who did the Bloody Mary ritual and never recovered. I'm not going to use their real names, but these are real cases, documented by mental health professionals and paranormal investigators. Case 1. A 17-year-old girl I'll call Emma. She did the ritual in 2015 as part of a YouTube challenge. She filmed it, posted it, got thousands of views. In the video, nothing obvious happens. But Emma deleted the video 3 days later and deleted all her social media accounts. According to her family, Emma became convinced that she had a shadow. Not just figuratively. She said there was a literal shadow following her that no one else could see. She started refusing to be alone. She would have panic attacks in any room with a mirror. Eventually, she had to be homeschooled because she couldn't function in public spaces with reflective surfaces. 7 years later, Emma still lives with her parents. She still can't be in a room with mirrors. She covers every reflective surface in her environment with cloth. Her therapist diagnosed her with severe anxiety disorder and possible psychosis, but Emma insists it's not in her head. She says she can still see the shadow sometimes, out of the corner of her eye. Always watching. Always waiting. Case 2. A 22-year-old man I'll call David. He did the ritual in 2018 as part of a dare during a party. Unlike most people, David claimed nothing happened. He laughed it off, called everyone superstitious idiots, went home. 2 weeks later, David stopped sleeping. Not because of nightmares. He physically could not sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he said he could feel someone standing over him. Someone breathing on his face. Someone whispering his name. After 5 days without sleep, he started hallucinating. After 7 days, he was hospitalized. The doctors gave him heavy sedatives, but even those didn't work consistently. It's been 6 years. David still struggles with severe insomnia. He can sleep for maybe 2 or 3 hours a night with medication, but he says it never feels restful. He says something is still there in the darkness behind his eyelids, still waiting for him. Case 3. A woman I'll call Rachel. She did the ritual in 2009 when she was 19. According to her account, she saw a face in the mirror that wasn't hers. A woman with hollow eyes and a mouth open in a scream. Rachel ran from the bathroom and tried to forget about it. But over the next year, Rachel started changing. Her friends and family noticed she was becoming more aggressive, more volatile. She'd have sudden outbursts of rage for no apparent reason. She started having gaps in her memory, hours where she couldn't remember what she'd done or where she'd been. And during these episodes, people said she seemed like a different person entirely. Her voice would change. Her mannerisms would change. She would say things she'd never say, know things she shouldn't know. Rachel was eventually diagnosed with dissociative identity disorder. But here's what's interesting. The alternate personality that emerged identified itself as Mary. And when Rachel's therapist asked this personality where it came from, it said, "She called me. She invited me in. Now we're sharing." Rachel has been in treatment for 14 years. The personality calling itself Mary is still there, still present. Rachel says sometimes she can feel Mary watching through her eyes, waiting for Rachel to let her guard down, waiting for a chance to take control. Here's the thing that keeps me up at night. The thing that made me spend months researching this topic. The thing that makes this legend so persistent and so disturbing. What if Bloody Mary isn't one thing? What if it's a title? A role? What if every time someone does this ritual and invites something through, they're not summoning the same entity? What if they're opening a door and whatever is on the other side, whatever is closest, whatever is hungriest, is what comes through? Think about it. The descriptions vary. Sometimes people see a woman in Victorian clothing. Sometimes they see a woman covered in blood. Sometimes they see a young girl. Sometimes an old woman. The face is never quite the same. The presence is never quite identical. What if Bloody Mary has become a generic summoning? What if by repeating this ritual, by spreading this legend, by teaching it to generation after generation of children, we've created a standing invitation, a permanent open door? And what if the things that come through aren't ghosts at all? What if there's something else entirely? Something that exists in those liminal spaces, those thin places between realities, and they've learned that when they hear those words, there's an opportunity, a chance to cross over, a chance to attach themselves to someone? This would explain why the experiences are so varied. Why some people see nothing and are fine. Why some people have temporary scares that fade. And why some people like Emma, David, and Rachel never recover. Because what they let through was something powerful enough to establish a permanent connection. Throughout history, there have been warnings about mirrors and summoning rituals. But we've turned them into entertainment. We've made them into games. We've stripped away the gravity and the caution and turned something that was meant to be taken seriously into a joke. In medieval Europe, there were strict rules about mirrors. They were expensive, rare, and considered dangerous. People believed that mirrors could steal souls, trap spirits, and serve as gateways for demons. These weren't superstitions invented to scare children. These were genuine beliefs held by educated adults who took spiritual matters seriously. When mirrors became more common and affordable in the 17th and 18th centuries, so did the warnings about them. There are records of priests blessing mirrors before they were hung in homes. There are accounts of mirrors being destroyed after strange occurrences. There are documented cases of mirrors being blamed for possessions, hauntings, and mysterious deaths. But over time we forgot. Or we decided it was all nonsense. We rationalized it away. And now we have millions of teenagers playing Bloody Mary at slumber parties, posting videos on TikTok, treating it like it's no more dangerous than a Ouija board. Except Ouija boards have their own dark history, their own warnings, their own cases of people who used them and wish they hadn't. The pattern is always the same. We take something that was meant to be approached with caution and respect, we strip away the context and the warnings, and we turn it into entertainment. And then we act surprised when sometimes, rarely but consistently, something goes wrong. Really wrong. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Nick, this is all very scary and very interesting, but how do we know any of this is real? How do we know these people aren't just lying or exaggerating or suffering from mental illness that has nothing to do with a ritual? Fair question. And here's my answer. We don't know. Not with absolute certainty. We can't prove that something supernatural is happening. We can't put it in a lab and measure it. We can't replicate it under controlled conditions reliably enough to satisfy scientific standards. But absence of proof isn't proof of absence. And when you have this many consistent reports across this many years, across this many cultures, at some point you have to ask yourself, what's more likely? That thousands of people across the world are independently creating similar stories about similar experiences with similar after effects? Or that there's something real happening here that we don't fully understand? I'm not telling you what to believe. I'm not here to convince you that the supernatural exists. What I'm here to tell you is that the Bloody Mary legend persists because the experiences are real. Whether those experiences are purely psychological or whether they involve something external, something other, the effect is the same. People are genuinely traumatized. Lives are genuinely affected. The fear is genuinely lasting. And that should be enough to make you think twice before standing in front of a mirror at 3 a.m. and saying those words. So what really happens when you say Bloody Mary 3 times? Here's what I think after all this research, after all these interviews, after all these sleepless nights going down this rabbit hole. I think something answers. I think something has been answering for a very long time. Maybe it's just our own minds, our own fears made manifest through the power of suggestion and the vulnerability of sensory deprivation. Maybe it's something more. Something that exists in the spaces between. Something that's learned that when it hears those words, there's an opportunity. Either way, the result is the same. You open a door. And sometimes what comes through that door doesn't go back. Sometimes it stays with you. Sometimes it follows you. And sometimes, if you're really unlucky, it becomes a part of you. Sarah Mitchell never talked about what she saw. 26 years later, she still won't. And maybe that's the smartest response. Maybe some things shouldn't be discussed. Maybe some things shouldn't be named. Because every time we tell the story, every time we repeat the legend, every time we dare someone to try it, we're keeping that door open. We're keeping the invitation active. Matthew Henderson let something through in 2003. And somewhere out there it's still waiting. Still attached. Still present in every reflection he sees. Emma still covers her mirrors. David still can't sleep. Rachel still shares her body with something that calls itself Mary. And you're sitting there right now, maybe in a dark room, maybe near a bathroom, and you're wondering. You're curious. You're thinking, would it really happen to me? What would I see? And that's exactly how it gets you. That curiosity. That doubt. That little voice in the back of your head saying, it's probably nothing. It's probably safe. It's probably just a story. Probably. But here's my advice. Don't find out. Don't test it. Don't stand in front of that mirror and say those words. Because the people who did, the ones who really experienced something, all of them wish they hadn't. All of them would go back and change that moment if they could. All of them would warn you to stay away. So I'm warning you. On their behalf. On behalf of everyone who looked into that mirror and saw something looking back. Stay away from this. Respect the boundary. Don't open that door. Because sometimes, what's behind it is exactly what you've been afraid of your entire life. And once you see it, once you know it's real, you can never unsee it. You can never go back to not knowing. And that knowledge, that certainty that there's something else out there in the darkness, something that knows your name now,